They say the river never forgets, but sometimes it remembers in ways that haunt you for the rest of your life. If you're into strange stories about animals, loyalty, and the thin line between love and danger, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow Animal's story for more eerie tales that'll leave you questioning what you think you know about man's best friend. Jack wasn't the type to talk much. He had a weathered face, deep-set eyes, and a voice rough like gravel. The kind of man you'd expect to find riding alone on the edge of nowhere, with only his horse and the wind for company. He'd lived out near the San Verde River for decades, working cattle and minding his own business. Life out there wasn't easy, but Jack liked it that way. Clean air, no drama, just him and the land. One late summer evening, something unusual stirred near the riverbank. Jack was on his way home from checking the fence line when he heard it. A soft, wheezing yelp, barely audible over the sound of cicadas. He pulled up his horse and listened. There it was again, a whimper, weak, desperate. Jack dismounted and followed the sound through the thick brush. Just a few feet from the water's edge, half covered in mud and tangled roots, lay a tiny Pitbull pup. Its fur was matted with blood and river scum, its ribs poking out through thin skin. It looked up at Jack with hollow, glassy eyes, too tired to move, but still clinging to life. Jack crouched down and gently freed the dog's hind leg from a coil of thorny vines. "You're not gonna die here, partner," he muttered, scooping the animal into his arms. Back at the cabin, Jack did what he could. Cleaned the wounds, boiled some beef and rice, let the pup sleep on a folded-up flannel shirt near the fire. Days passed. The dog didn't move much at first, but it ate. Slowly, its eyes regained a little spark. Jack named him Rusty, mostly because of the color in his fur when it finally dried out, but also because the pup reminded him of an old truck, beat up, abandoned, but still built to run if given a second chance. Weeks turned into months. Rusty grew stronger. He followed Jack everywhere, out to the fields, into town, even into the river, though he always hesitated at the edge of the water. Sometimes he'd just stand there, hackles raised, growling low. Jack figured the near-death trauma had left a mark. "Can't blame you," he'd say, giving the dog a scratch behind the ear. "Hell, if I'd almost drowned in that river, I wouldn't want to go near it either." But Rusty was loyal, fiercely so. He'd bark at anyone who came too close to Jack's truck or porch. One time he even chased off a coyote trying to sneak into the chicken coop. The pup was tough as nails and smart as hell. Still, there were odd moments. At night, Rusty would sometimes sit by the back porch, staring toward the river. Not barking, not whining, just watching, like he was waiting for something, listening. Jack would joke, "What are you looking for, boy? Ghosts in the water?" But the older he got, the more that joke stopped being funny. Because, deep down, something about Rusty's eyes felt different. Like they knew something Jack didn't. Something old. Something that had crawled out of that muddy river with him. Jack never spoke of it to anyone. After all, what was there to say? A man and his dog. Nothing strange about that. But the San Verde River had a reputation. One of those places that locals said ain't quite right. And Jack had started to wonder, what if he hadn't just pulled out a half-dead dog that day? What if he'd pulled out something else entirely? Rusty had been with Jack for almost 3 years when the first truly strange thing happened. It was early spring, one of those rare mornings when the air felt thick, heavy like something was coming but never arrived. Jack was out mending the eastern fence line when he heard a low growl behind him. Rusty, tail stiff, eyes locked on something down by the river bend. Jack followed his gaze and saw nothing, just willows swaying gently by the water, casting long shadows on the muddy bank. But Rusty refused to move. His body trembled like a taut wire. "Hey now," Jack muttered. "Ain't nothing there." But Rusty didn't blink, didn't even flinch when Jack tugged his collar. It wasn't fear, it was focus. Like he could see something Jack couldn't, something coming closer. Later that night, back at the cabin, Rusty refused to come inside. He sat out on the porch, head turned toward the river again. Jack watched from the window as the Pitbull let out a long, low howl, soft but chilling. A sound that didn't quite belong in the mouth of a dog. Jack shook it off, chalked it up to an animal's instinct, maybe a cougar nearby. Maybe Rusty just didn't like the way the wind felt. But as weeks passed, it got worse. Rusty began disappearing at night. Jack would wake up and find the back door cracked open, the dog nowhere in sight. Sometimes he'd return at dawn, paws muddy and soaked, eyes distant like he'd been sleepwalking through a dream. Once, Jack spotted red smears on his fur. When he tried to check, Rusty growled, a low, warning growl Jack had never heard before. He let it go, told himself it was just an old dog being stubborn. But Jack wasn't sleeping much anymore. One night, around 2 a.m., he heard something outside. Not barking, not howling, talking. A whisper, faint and garbled, like it was traveling underwater, but unmistakably human. Jack grabbed his rifle and stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung low over the trees, casting a pale light across the property. And there was Rusty, standing at the edge of the river. Still, too still. Jack called his name, but the dog didn't respond. Just stood there, facing the water like he was having a conversation with it. The next morning, Jack found claw marks on the inside of the front door. Deep, frenzied scratches that hadn't been there the night before, like something or someone had tried to get in. That was the first time he locked the doors since moving out here. Then came the dreams. Jack started seeing Rusty in his sleep, but not as he knew him. In the dreams, the dog was massive, taller than any pit bull should have been. Eyes glowing amber, teeth black and jagged, and always standing by the river, whispering without moving its mouth. One dream ended with Jack kneeling at the riverbank, hands tied behind his back, as Rusty circled him slowly. In the distance, a voice whispered, "You took him from us. Now we take you." Jack woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a stampede. For a second, he swore he saw muddy paw prints leading from the foot of his bed to the door. He didn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? The old cowboy going crazy out in the woods with his weird dog and ghost stories. But deep down, Jack knew something was wrong. Rusty wasn't just a dog anymore, if he ever had been. And that river, it hadn't forgotten. It was waiting. 3 weeks after Jack disappeared, the town stopped pretending it was just an accident. At first, people did what they always do when an old man goes missing in the wild, shrugged it off. "Probably slipped and broke a hip," someone said at the diner. "Bet he's halfway to Mexico, drunk on moonshine," another joked. But the jokes stopped the day Hank Mulrooney's dog went missing too. Hank was Jack's nearest neighbor, if you could call someone living 5 miles away a neighbor. He'd known Jack since high school. They weren't close, but they shared enough beers and barbed wire repairs to call it a kind of friendship. So when Jack vanished, Hank figured it was his duty to check out the riverbank. He never made it to the water. He got about halfway down the trail when his pit mix, Daisy, started barking like crazy, not at anything they could see, just at the trees, the mud, the air itself. Then Daisy turned and bolted back the way they came, only she didn't come home. Hank found her collar the next morning hanging from a low branch, 7 feet off the ground. That's when he stopped calling it a search and started calling it what it was. Something wrong. The sheriff put up signs. "Danger, unstable riverbank. Do not enter." But that didn't stop the kids. Teenagers started sneaking out there at night, trying to prove they weren't scared. They'd film videos for TikTok, Dead Dog Bend Challenge, trying to stay at the river's edge for 5 minutes in total silence. None of them made it past 3. They said it wasn't the dark or the water, it was the feeling like something was watching them from below, like the river itself was breathing. One kid swore he saw a pair of eyes just beneath the surface, glowing faint red. Another said she heard a voice, deep, gravelly, calling her name, even though no one there knew her. The videos were deleted the next day. Accounts wiped clean. Parents furious. Some of those kids don't talk much anymore. The old folks in town started whispering stories again. Stories they hadn't told in years. About a time, long before Jack ever showed up, when a hunter pulled a mangy pup out of the same river, only to vanish a year later with no trace. About a preacher's wife who swore a shadow dog followed her home from the Bend in 1956. Back then, they said it was just folk tales, river myths, something to scare kids into staying away from deep water. But now, nobody was laughing. One morning, the town woke to find dozens of muddy paw prints outside the post office. No dogs in sight, just prints. Huge ones, leading to the front door and circling around it, like something pacing, waiting. Inside, the mail was shredded. No alarms tripped, no signs of a break-in. No one knew what to say. Reverend Miller called it a spiritual warning. Sheriff Hanks called it some teenagers with too much time and too big a dog. But the look in his eyes said something else. By mid-autumn, 3 more dogs had gone missing. 2 were found days later, mangled near the riverbank. The 3rd was never recovered. And always the same thing. Paw prints too large for any normal animal. Blood smeared across rocks. And silence that seemed too heavy, too thick. Like sound itself refused to settle there. Jack's cabin was eventually boarded up. No one wanted to buy the land. The sheriff asked the county to reroute the survey project. Too dangerous, he said. Land's unstable. Mudslide risk. But anyone who'd lived there long enough knew that wasn't the reason. It wasn't the land that was unstable, it was the river. And whatever Jack had pulled from it 10 years ago, it hadn't stayed buried. It was almost winter when Caleb Dunn came back to town. He was Jack's nephew, mid-30s, former Army, now doing long-haul trucking out of Amarillo. He hadn't been back to San Verde since his parents' funeral 5 years earlier. But when he heard about his uncle's disappearance, something pulled at him. "Old man wouldn't just vanish," he told the bartender at Rusty Spur one night, "not without leaving a note or a bullet." The sheriff didn't argue. Neither did the locals. Everyone felt it, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Caleb didn't believe in ghosts, demons, or river curses. He believed in tracks, evidence, answers. So when he drove out to Jack's place, he wasn't looking for closure. He was looking for facts. The cabin looked the same, just older, sadder, and covered in cobwebs. Dust lay thick over Jack's boots, still sitting by the back door. The coffee tin on the counter was half full. Caleb stood in the silence, absorbing the stillness. That's when he saw it. A single muddy paw print on the kitchen floor. Large, fresh, too fresh. He didn't spook easy, but this gave him pause. Outside, the air was unnaturally still. No birds, no wind, just that same tension in the trees like the world was holding its breath. He followed the trail, paw prints leading down the hill straight toward the river. Dead Dog Bend. When he reached the edge of the bank, Caleb crouched low. The prints circled a bare patch of dirt, almost like a ritual site. He found the burned remains of what looked like an old flannel shirt and a shattered coffee mug. It was Jack's. Then came the voice. Not loud, not angry, just tired. "You came back." Caleb spun around, hand on his holster. No one. Nothing but the river gurgling softly downstream. Then he saw the eyes. Not in the trees, not in the sky, in the water, amber and deep-set, watching, unblinking. The surface broke, and from it crawled a figure. It looked like a dog. Broad chest, heavy frame, but the fur was patchy, more like seaweed than hair. Its back legs moved like they didn't belong on land. Its mouth was wider than it should have been. And the eyes, they were Jack's. "Rusty," Caleb whispered. The thing stopped moving. It tilted its head just like a puppy does, and then it smiled. Caleb didn't run. He stood frozen, trying to understand. That's when he heard a second growl behind him. He turned just in time to see a second creature, smaller but faster, leap from the trees. He fired. Missed. It grazed his leg and vanished into the brush. They weren't alone. There were more. They say Caleb got away, limped back to his truck and burned rubber out of that cursed place. Never looked back. He tried to file a report with the county, but no one would touch it. The sheriff said he was suffering from trauma. Just river madness. But Caleb knew better. He said the thing that wore Rusty's shape wasn't a dog anymore. Maybe never was. Maybe it was something older. Something the river had kept locked up for centuries. A spirit. A curse. A creature that needed a body to walk the earth. Jack gave it one, and now it waits for more. People don't go near Dead Dog Bend anymore. Not even for dares. At night, folks swear they hear barking, not angry, but hollow, echoing through the trees. Sometimes it sounds like laughter. Sometimes it sounds like crying. And sometimes, when the fog rolls thick across the river, you can see a man and his dog walking the bank side by side, until they disappear into the water. It's been over a year since Caleb Dunn left San Verde and swore never to come back. He moved east, changed his number, quit trucking altogether. People who run into him say he doesn't talk much anymore, keeps a loaded shotgun in the passenger seat, sleeps with the lights on. But every once in a while he tells the story. Not to scare people, not for attention, just so somebody out there knows the truth. Because Dead Dog Bend hasn't gone quiet, not even close. It started small, stray dogs turning up outside people's homes in the dead of night. Matted, wet, with glowing eyes, and a silence that didn't feel natural. One old man tried to shoot one and claimed the bullet went straight through. The next day, his wife found him face down in the chicken coop, every bone in his body shattered like glass. They buried him quick, but nobody said a word at the funeral. Then came the blackout. The entire eastern grid went down one night, just for 30 minutes, and when the lights came back, a herd of cattle was missing from Tucker's ranch. No tracks, no blood, just fence wires cut clean and the faint stench of river mud on the breeze. People started whispering that the curse hadn't stayed in the river. It had spread. Sheriff Hanks eventually retired, moved to Arizona. His replacement, young kid from El Paso, refused to talk about the Bend. It's just wildlife, he'd say, but he wouldn't patrol past mile marker 17, claimed his cruiser's electronics glitched every time he got too close to the river. Then there was the preacher's dog, sweet old golden retriever named Penny. Used to greet every churchgoer at the door. One Sunday morning, she didn't show up. Later that night, someone found what was left of her fur snagged in the church's fence, along with a trail of enormous paw prints headed straight for the water. No one ever found Penny's body, just a broken collar, crushed like it had been chewed from the inside out. Now, folks around San Verde don't let their animals outside after dark. Some even hang iron horseshoes over their doorways, an old superstition against skinwalkers and river spirits. Tourists don't stop anymore. The bait shop closed. Even the teens quit doing their dead dog challenges. Because the legend has stopped being a story. It's become a rule. Never follow a sound into the woods. Never call out to a dog near the river. And for God's sake, if something scratches at your door at night, don't open it. Some people think Jack's story ended when he vanished. But others say he became part of it, swallowed by the curse he unknowingly awakened. That Rusty, or whatever wore his skin, wasn't just a monster. It was bait. A loyal face twisted into a snare to drag others down into the same watery darkness. Caleb still won't say what he saw that night by the river. But the scars on his leg tell part of the story. And the nightmares? They tell the rest. So here's the question. If you found a starving dog alone in the woods, weak, bleeding, on the edge of death, would you help it? Even if the place felt off? Even if your gut screamed no? Or would you do what Jack did, what any decent person might do, and take it home? Because sometimes what looks like a victim was just the beginning of something much, much worse. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Jack's boots? And if this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button for more twisted tales of animals, instincts, and the things we were never meant to save.